The courtroom was drowning in silence. Not the kind of silence that comforts, but the kind that crawls under your skin and steals the air from your lungs. Every camera lens was fixed on Sean Diddy Combs, frozen at the defendant's table. His hands clenched tight, fingers locked together, lips pressed into a thin, lifeless line. The bright orange of his prison jumpsuit burned under the fluorescent lights, a brutal reminder how far he had fallen. The man who once owned stadiums, red carpets, and billion-dollar empires now looked like a caged figure waiting for judgment. The air crackled with tension. Spectators sat stiff, whispering in hushed tones that only made the weight of the room heavier. Reporters gripped their pens like loaded weapons, ready to fire the first headline. Across the aisle, prosecutors shuffled through their files with calm precision, their confidence radiating. Meanwhile, Diddy's defense team huddled in close, whispering hurried, desperate strategies. Every creak of the wooden benches echoed like thunder as the gallery's eyes darted nervously between the judge's still hands and Diddy's expressionless face. Then it came, the sound. A simple shuffle of papers from the judge's bench, but it was louder than anything else in the room. Diddy's breath quickened. His eyes fell to the polished floor for just a second, as if he were replaying his entire life in fast-forward. He blinked hard, his jaw tightening, fighting to keep his composure. But beneath that mask, fear was alive. It sat in his face like a shadow, undeniable to anyone who looked closely enough. Before we dive deeper into this unforgettable moment, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the bell icon so you never miss stories like this. Now, let's get back to it. Outside, chaos rumbled. Protesters and supporters clashed like two raging storms, their chants seeping faintly through the thick courtroom walls. Inside, the tension grew unbearable, while on the outside, social media was already in flames. Millions were tuned into live streams. Hashtags trended globally. Everyone was waiting for this verdict, the line between history and chaos. Finally, the judge raised her head. She adjusted her glasses with deliberate slowness and scanned the courtroom. Her gaze swept over the prosecutors, the jury, the gallery, and then, finally, it landed on Diddy. He stared back, unblinking, but the trembling of his cuffed hands against the polished table betrayed him. Cameras zoomed in, capturing every twitch, every shift, every flicker of emotion. His face was a mask, but the rise and fall of his chest told a story of panic he couldn't hide. One of his lawyers leaned close, whispering frantically, but Diddy didn't move. His eyes never left the judge, as if daring her to speak, daring her to decide his fate with a single breath. Across the aisle, a prosecutor leaned back in his chair with the faintest smirk, like he already knew how the story would end. The entire courtroom was frozen, watching history unfold in slow motion. Jurors shifted nervously. Some avoided his eyes altogether. Others stared straight ahead, knuckles white as they clutched the arms of their chairs. And then, stillness. Heavy, endless. The judge parted her lips, inhaling deeply, ready to speak. The weight of the moment crashed down on every soul in that room like a mountain. People didn't just want the verdict. They needed it. Diddy exhaled, shoulders sinking slightly, as though carrying the weight of his entire empire on his back. His future, his freedom, his legacy, all of it hung by the thinnest thread, ready to snap with a single sentence. The silence was unbearable now, every tick of the clock slicing through him like a blade. One decision, one breath, one verdict that could erase everything. He glanced sideways for the briefest moment. Just a few rows back, his mother clutched a wrinkled tissue in trembling hands. Her lips moved in silence, whispering prayers only she could hear. Beside her, one of Diddy's sons hid his face in his palms, refusing to look up, while another sat motionless, eyes fixed on the floor, numb to everything. Diddy turned away quickly, his throat tightening. He tried to swallow, but his mouth was bone-dry, parched from endless hours of waiting, of reliving every deal, every choice, every mistake that had led him to this exact moment. For just a split second, his mind escaped. He was back on stage, thousands of fans chanting his name, lights flashing, cameras worshipping his every move. His empire untouchable. But the fantasy crumbled in an instant. He blinked, and the cold steel of the shackles around his ankles dragged him back. This wasn't a performance. There was no encore waiting for him here. Across the aisle, Prosecutors whispered in hushed tones, their expressions unreadable but edged with quiet satisfaction. They had spent months tearing his life apart piece by piece, dragging skeletons into the spotlight for the world to see. One leaned back casually, tapping his pen against the desk in a slow rhythm, radiating confidence, almost triumph. Meanwhile, Diddy's attorney leaned in close, whispering a single warning: "Stay calm, no matter what happens." But the words felt distant, swallowed by the pounding of Diddy's heartbeat in his ears. Calm? How could he be calm when his entire life was seconds away from collapsing? At the back of the courtroom, cameras sat poised like predators circling prey, lenses locked onto him, reporters perched at the ready, thumbs hovering over their phones, eager to launch the verdict into the world. On social media, the storm was already raging, hundreds of thousands of comments flooding live streams. Some prayed for him, others begged for his downfall. But in this room, only one voice mattered: the judge's. Diddy inhaled sharply, trying to slow his breathing, forcing his chest into steady rises and falls. His palms were slick with sweat, rubbing together under the table in a desperate attempt to ground himself. His eyes locked on the judge's hands, folded neatly over the papers that contained his fate. She had read it all, the transcripts, the testimonies, the evidence stacked like a mountain against him. And now, with a single sentence, she would decide everything. A sudden creak echoed through the courtroom as the jurors shifted in their seat. Instinctively, Diddy's eyes darted toward them, searching their faces for mercy, for even the faintest glimmer of sympathy. But there was nothing, just blank stares, hardened expressions, the faces of people who had listened for weeks as his life unraveled in brutal detail. They weren't fans. They weren't critics. They were his judges. He exhaled sharply, trying to summon strength from somewhere deep inside. Once, he was untouchable, a king in his own world, a man feared and admired in equal measure. But now, stripped of the power, the fame, the entourage, he was just another man, waiting to hear if his life was already over. A faint cough broke the silence for a second, before it was swallowed again by the crushing stillness. Even the air felt heavy, like the room itself was holding its breath. Slowly, Diddy leaned back into his chair, whispering something too low to hear. A prayer, a plea, maybe both. Then the judge cleared her throat. The shuffle of papers cut through the silence like a blade. Instantly, the entire room froze. Murmurs stopped. The gallery stiffened. Every eye locked on the woman who now held his destiny in her hands. The tension stretched sharp as a wire, ready to snap. Diddy blinked slowly, lowering his head ever so slightly, as if bracing for impact. The world was watching. Every heartbeat thundered. Every second stretched into eternity. The moment of truth had finally arrived. And just like that, the moment everyone feared and everyone craved was seconds away. The judge adjusted her glasses, her face unreadable, carved in stone. But the weight of what she was about to unleash pressed down on the entire room, like a storm cloud ready to break. Diddy stared at her, unblinking, almost daring her to meet his eyes. She didn't. Instead, she unfolded the papers before her with surgical precision, fingertips grazing the edges as if the words themselves burned. "You may all be seated," she finally said, her voice sharp, steady, commanding. The room shifted with a soft rustle of bodies lowering back into wooden benches. Every inch of the gallery was packed, reporters, critics, strangers, fans, all craning forward, desperate not to miss a single flicker of his reaction. Cameras zoomed in so close you could see the sweat gathering on his brow. This wasn't just a trial anymore. This was history, unraveling in real time. Diddy's chest tightened with each passing second. His cuffed hands rested stiffly on the table, the cold bite of steel digging into his wrists, reminding him this was no nightmare. He glanced at his attorney, who gave a barely-there nod of reassurance. But his lawyer's eyes betrayed him, nervous, tight, uncertain. Even he didn't know which way this moment would fall. Then the words came. The judge's voice cut through the suffocating silence like a blade. After reviewing all evidence, testimonies, and deliberations, she paused, eyes scanning the room from above her glasses, letting the weight of it all hang like a noose. This caught fine Sean Combs. The pause stretched forever. Diddy's fingers clenched white around the edge of the table. Guilty on multiple counts. Gasps tore through the courtroom like an explosion. Someone screamed from the back, the sound sharp roar. Flashbulbs erupted like fireworks as reporters scrambled to capture the exact instant Diddy's empire collapsed. He didn't move. He didn't breathe. His body froze, unwilling to process what his mind already knew. His world had just ended. His eyes darted instinctively toward his family. His mother's face was buried in her hands, shoulders shaking violently, as his youngest daughter clung to his side in terror. His son sat pale and lifeless, staring blankly ahead as though their souls had been hollowed out in front of everyone. Diddy blinked hard, his jaw clenching, trying to drag himself back to the judge's words. But her voice sounded muffled now, drowned by the ringing in his ears. Words like fraud, racketeering, criminal conspiracy, each one cut like a dagger, tearing into what was left of his legacy. The prosecutor sat still, expressionless, except for the faint smirk curling on one of their faces. He leaned over, whispering something to the lead investigator beside him, a whisper that carried the weight of triumph. For them, this was victory. For Diddy, it was annihilation. He looked back down at his cuffed hands. No diamonds, no Rolex, no power. The fleshy cars, the mansions, the billion-dollar deals, all gone. What remained was just a man in an orange jumpsuit, stripped bare, listening as strangers dismantled his future one guilty verdict at a time. Each count landed like a wave, dragging him deeper into the abyss. His breathing grew ragged, his jaw aching from the force of his clenched teeth, his hands trembling despite his effort to hide it. Then suddenly, bang, the courtroom doors burst open. A late reporter stumbled in, crashing into a bench, shocking the room for a split second. But the judge's glare cut through the chaos instantly, restoring silence sharper than before. Diddy's eyes followed the brief commotion, desperate for any escape, any distraction. But there was no escape. Wherever he turned, the truth followed. He leaned closer to his attorney, voice low, shaking, desperate. His lawyer exhaled slowly, hesitated, then leaned in. It means they are pushing for the maximum. Diddy swallowed hard, chest pounding. He shut his eyes for a split second, searching for strength, but there was none. No cameras to glamorize him, no stage to command, no crowd chanting his name. Only a judge, a verdict, and a nation watching as his empire crumbled in real time. The judge leaned forward, her voice sharp, deliberate. This court will now proceed to sentencing. The gallery shifted. Reporters typed furiously. Cameras zoomed tighter, murmurs rippled like fire through dry grass. Diddy's pulse thundered in his ears. Whatever came next would decide everything. For a moment, the room was frozen in disbelief. Then chaos exploded. Gasps from the gallery, muffled sobs from the back, whispers multiplying like wildfire. But in the center of it all, Diddy sat stiff, gripping the table so hard his knuckles had turned white. His breathing was shallow, ragged. His empire was collapsing in real time. His attorney leaned closer, whispering rapid-fire strategy. But Diddy barely heard him. The ringing in his ears drowned everything out. He turned his head just enough to catch his mother's eyes. She was sobbing openly now, clutching a crumpled tissue, lips moving in frantic prayers. His daughter clung to her grandmother, terrified, her wide brown eyes darting desperately around the room. Suddenly, a voice cut through the chaos. This is outrageous. One of Diddy's lead attorneys slammed his palm against the table, the sound cracking like a gunshot. We object. This entire process is. Sit down, counselor. The judge snapped, her tone flat but deadly sharp. She didn't need to raise her voice. The authority in it silenced the room instantly. The attorney froze, chest heaving, before slowly sinking back into his seat. But the damage was done. The tension shifted. Reporters erupted, shouting questions over one another. Diddy, how do you feel about the verdict? Are you planning to appeal? Cameras flashed like lightning. Diddy didn't answer. He couldn't. His throat was sand, his mind spinning too fast to form words. His eyes drifted toward the prosecutors, stone-faced, emotionless, except for the faint curl of a smirk on the lead prosecutor's lips. That smirk burned him inside. Then, from the back of the gallery, chaos again. One of Diddy's longtime security men shot to his feet, voice booming. This is a setup. You all know this is wrong. He jabbed a finger toward the prosecutors, his body trembling with rage. Court officers rushed in, dragging him down, forcing him back into his seat. The scuffle sent a ripple of shock across the room. For a split second, it looked like the entire place was about to erupt. "Order in my courtroom." The judge barked, her gavel slamming like thunder. "One more outburst, and I will clear this room immediately." But the air was already charged, wild, uncontrollable. Diddy's legal team huddled, whispering frantically, leniency, emergence motions, last-minute filings. But the cracks were showing. Even his so-called dream team looked like they were unraveling. And then came the prosecutor's move. Standing tall, voice steady, deliberate, the lead attorney for the government stepped forward. "Your Honor," he said, his words cold, calculated, echoing through the silence. "In light of the convictions on these counts," the state's words hit like a freight train, "we are formally requesting the maximum sentence allowed by law." Diddy blinked hard, as if daring himself to believe he'd misheard. But no, the prosecutors were serious, deadly serious. They weren't here to bargain. They weren't here to negotiate. They were here to bury him. His lawyer shot up instantly, voice cracking with the strain. "This is outrageous. My client has no prior violent offenses. These charges are being weaponized." The prosecutor cut him off like a blade. Weaponized? He weaponized an empire. He exploited, manipulated, and broke laws because he believed his power made him untouchable. Today, we prove he's not. The gallery erupted. Reporters rose to their feet, shouting questions, cameras flashing like a battlefield of strobe lights. Security strained to hold the chaos back. And then, amid the storm, Diddy finally spoke. His voice was low, cracked, but it carried. "I built everything," he whispered, staring into the void ahead of him. "Everything I worked for, gone." For the first time, he slumped, the fight drained from his body. This wasn't exhaustion anymore. It was surrender. The mogul who once towered over the music world now sat shackled, small, waiting for strangers to decide how many years of his life would vanish. The judge slammed her gavel. "We will proceed with sentencing after a short recess." Chaos surged again. Reporters barked questions. Security forced order. Diddy's family clung to one another in tears. His legal team whispered frantically, already plotting. But everyone knew. The damage was done. When the doors opened after recess, the energy had changed. Gone was the noise, the frenzy. Now there was only silence. Heavy, suffocating. Every breath, every shuffle, every heartbeat echoed like thunder. Sentencing. No more debates. No more games. This was it. Diddy shuffled back into the courtroom between two U.S. Marshals. The orange jumpsuit weighed on him like chains, the cuffs cutting cold into his wrists. For the first time, the untouchable mogul looked small, defeated. His family sat in the front row, hands gripped so tightly their knuckles blanched. His mother clutched a trembling Bible. His eldest son sat rigid, jaw locked in unspoken fury. The judge took her seat, gavel slamming once. "We are reconvened to proceed with sentencing." The prosecutor rose, ties straightened, voice sharp as glass. "Your Honor, we've laid out every detail. We've shown how Sean Combs uses wealth and power to manipulate, to control, to destroy. Today, the people demand accountability. We request a maximum sentence allowed by law." Gasps rippled through the gallery. Reporters scribbled frantically. Cameras exploded in blinding flashes. It wasn't unexpected, but hearing it spoken aloud struck like a thunderclap. Diddy's lawyer leapt to his feet, desperation seeping through every syllable. "Your Honor, my client has dedicated his life to building opportunity for others. He has no violent record. He is a father, a son, a mentor. We beg this court for leniency." The judge sat still, unreadable. Her eyes scanned her notes as the room held its breath. And then, unexpectedly, Diddy rose. His voice trembled, his words fractured, but they carried like a plea torn from his soul. "Your Honor, I've made mistakes. I've hurt people. I've lost myself. But I'm begging you, don't take the rest of my life away. My children still need me. I want a chance to make things right." For a fleeting moment, the courtroom softened. A few in the gallery even wiped at their eyes. His mother's shoulders shook with silent sobs. His daughter pressed her face into her grandmother's sleeve. But the prosecutor stood once more, voice like iron. Regret after conviction does not erase decades of abuse and corruption. This court cannot be swayed by tears. The silence that followed was unbearable. The judge folded her hands, eyes falling to the papers before her. The weight of decades, power, legacy, all of it, balanced on the next word she would speak. Diddy's lips trembled as a word sank in. His eyes darted around the courtroom, searching for a crack in reality, a way out, anything but this. His voice broke into a whisper only his lawyer could hear. No, this can't be happening. But the judge's tone cut through him like steel. You are hereby sentenced to 30 years in federal prison, without the possibility of parole. Gasps ripped through the courtroom. Reporters scrambled for the exits, their phones already lit as the news exploded across the world. Outside, chants of protesters shook the building, a storm of rage and triumph clashing in the air. Some shouted for justice, others cried betrayal, but inside, Diddy's world collapsed. He tried to stand, but his legs buckled beneath him. His knees slammed the floor with a sickening thud that echoed across the silent chamber. His mother screamed and fell into his daughter's arms, while his son buried his face in trembling hands. The family shattered before the cameras, the empire crumbling in real time. Tays carved down his face as bailiffs rushed to hold him steady. The man who once ruled with power and untouchable influence now looked frail, broken, stripped of the armor he had worn for decades. The judge's gavel cracked like thunder, order in the court, but there was no order left. Only chaos, only downfall. Diddy slumped into his chair, his lawyer's frantic words lost in the fog of despair. 30 years, no parole, no second chance. The sentence replayed in his head like a curse that would never end. The camera zoomed in, capturing the exact moment the king fell from his throne. Outside, hashtags raged, news tickers flashed, and the world split in half, justice or conspiracy, punishment or persecution. But for Sean Diddy Combs, there was only silence. His legacy erased in a single gavel strike. His empire reduced to rubble. His story no longer his to tell. And as bailiff led him away in shackles, one truth loomed over everything louder than the chant, louder than the headlines. The dynasty was dead, and the fall was final. Diddy's lawyer tried to reassure him, whispering, "This isn't over. We still have options." But Diddy didn't answer. His empire had collapsed in seconds, and it was clear he couldn't even process it. The man who once dominated stages, boardrooms, and global charts now sat hollow, a broken figure swallowed by silence. Outside, the courthouse erupted again as the crowd surged. Police drew batons. Tension boiled over when a glass bottle flew across the barricade, shattering at an officer's feet. Within moments, riot squads advanced, shields raised, sirens blaring, booming commands scattering protesters backward. Then it happened. A live stream caught Diddy's first word since the verdict as marshals pulled him toward an armored van. His face was pale, his voice cracking, and he muttered, "They wanted to destroy me, and they did." The clip went viral instantly. Millions shared it within minutes, turning courthouse chaos into a worldwide spectacle. Hashtags exploded. Hash did a verdict. Hash justice or witch hunt. Hash 32 years. Inside the van, Diddy leaned back against the cold steel walls, his hands trembling as chants faded into the low hum of the engine. Inside him, a storm raged, anger, fear, and desperation colliding in silence. Back inside the courthouse, prosecutors wasted no time. Cameras flashed as the lead prosecutor announced, "Today's verdict proves one thing. No one, not money, not fame, not power, stands above the law." The statement cut deeper than the sentence itself, stripping away what little influence Diddy had left. The armored van pulled away, its flashing lights bouncing off darkened windows like a funeral procession. Behind him, Manhattan drowned in chaos. Protests, helicopters, reporters choking the streets. Ahead of him loomed decades in a federal cell and the ruins of an empire left behind. Inside that silence, as the van rumbled forward, Sean Diddy Combs whispered a single word to himself. "Why?" The sound vanished into the metal walls, swallowed by the engine's growl. Shackled at the wrists and ankles, he sat slumped, eyes bloodshot, breath heavy. For a moment, It looked like pure defeat. But then, almost imperceptibly, something shifted. Diddy leaned forward in the dim cabin, scanning his surroundings, and the silence began to feel less like surrender and more like calculation. The van rocked violently as the doors flew open, smoke spilling into the streets. The roar of the crowd drowned out everything, the guards shouting, the sirens blaring, even the pounding in Diddy's chest. Protesters surged forward, shoving against the officers as fists and banners clashed with shields. The moment the back doors gaped wide, a tidal wave of bodies pressed in, chanting his name like a war cry. Free Diddy! Free Diddy! For a split second, he stood in the doorway, framed by the chaos, his silhouette caught in the glare of floodlights and camera flashes. The guards fought desperately to push the crowd back, but Diddy slipped through the opening like smoke. His wrists, now free, swung at his sides as he lunged forward, swallowed into the mob. Hands reached for him, some to protect, others just to touch him, as the protesters formed a living shield around him. Behind him, the van was collapsing into pure pandemonium. The guards screamed for backup, guns raised but unable to fire without hitting civilians. Radios crackled frantically as a word shot across the city. Prison escape. High profile. Repeat, prison escape. But Diddy was already gone. His breath tore through his lungs as strangers shoved a hood over his head, guiding him like a phantom through the sea of bodies. Every step away from the van was a step back into the world he thought he'd lost forever. The smoke, the sirens, the flashes, it all blurred together, and for the first time since the sentence, his eyes burned with something new. Not despair, not fear, hope. In the chaos, someone whispered in his ear, "We got you, boss. Just keep moving." And for the first time that night, Diddy realized this wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. Diddy's out. The scream cut through the smoke, and the roar of the crowd swallowed everything else. Helicopters dropped their spotlights on him, blinding and merciless. Cameras zoomed in as Sean Combs stumbled from the van, coughing, sweat soaking his prison jumpsuit. For a moment, the world froze, then erupted. Sirens wailed, barricades rattled, and every news anchor in America broke into the same frantic headline: Diddy on the run. Through the chaos, his eyes locked onto a hooded figure in the crowd. Not family, not security. Someone else. The man motioned once, sharp and certain, and suddenly everything clicked. This wasn't a protest. This wasn't chance. It was an extraction. A plan. The crowd swallowed him whole, pulling him out of sight, and when the smoke cleared, he was gone. The block was drowning in flashing lights and helicopter blades. But Sean Combs wasn't heading to prison. Not tonight. Inside a federal command center, agents scrambled. Drone feeds, live streams, shaky cell videos, all showing the same thing. Diddy sprinting through alleys, ducking barricades, weaving through tear gas and chaos. Locked down Manhattan, the commander barked. 2-mile radius. No way in, no way out. But on the streets, he kept running, breath ragged, the orange jumpsuit glowing under the street lamps. Every turn felt like a trap, every corner a dead end, until a black SUV waited, idling in the shadows. The hooded man stepped out, calm, deliberate. The door swung open. "Get in." Diddy hesitated, chest heaving, heart pounding. He didn't know this man. Didn't know if this was a setup or salvation. But the agents were closing in, the helicopters shifting overhead. He dove inside. The SUV roared to life, tires screeching as it tore through side streets. Bullets slammed into metal, glass exploding across Diddy's lap. He ducked low, clutching the seat, shouting, "Are you insane?" The driver never looked back. He tossed a burner phone into Diddy's lap. A single message glowed on the screen: "Trust no one. Keep moving." Before he could speak, the SUV swerved hard, smashing into a dumpster, scraping spark against concrete as it slipped into an alley barely wide enough for 2 tires. Agents spilled into the street behind, rifles raised. Too late. The truck shot out onto 7th Avenue, swallowed into a flood of panicked protesters. Diddy yanked a hoodie over his head, hiding his face as cameras still flashed, streaming every second to millions. The city was burning with his name, and across every network, anchors leaned forward, breathless, their voices trembling with disbelief. This wasn't just another headline about a celebrity downfall. This was a federal crisis in motion. Inside the courtroom, the judge, face red and voice shaking, brought his gavel down so hard the wood split. Lock down the city, he barked at the marshals. I want Sean Combs in custody by midnight. But outside, the streets told a different story. Protesters stormed the barricades, chanting louder than the sirens. Free Diddy. Free Diddy. For a moment, his escape didn't look like desperation. It looked like revolution. Inside the black SUV, silence pressed heavy until the driver finally spoke. Listen carefully. You're not safe here. They'll come after you harder than ever. This was only the beginning. Diddy sat back, eyes fixed on the blur of the skyline under flashing lights, helicopters circling like predators. His breath slowed, his focus sharpened. What's the plan? He asked quietly. The driver turned just enough to reveal a scar carved down his cheek. First, we get you out of New York. Second, he let the pause hang like a weight. We expose a deal they never wanted the world to know. Diddy's eyes narrowed. What deal? But before an answer came, the rearview mirror told its own story. 2 unmarked SUVs closing in fast. They are here, the driver growled, slamming the accelerator. The city erupted into chaos as sirens wailed and helicopters swept low overhead. The chase thundered down the highway, headlights slicing the night. Diddy gripped the seatbelt, his body tense, the truth sinking in. This wasn't freedom. This was war. And as the SUV disappeared into the darkness, the nation held its breath, knowing one thing for certain. Nothing about Sean Diddy Combs' case would ever be the same again. Tonight, everything changed.